Creepypastas are great, but what's a horror story you have experienced? My grandparents had an old house that they bought in 1950. I grew up hearing stories about weird things that happened around the house. One night when I was 12, I was at their house alone. I didn't want to sleep upstairs in the bedrooms because sometimes I would hear footsteps and feel like someone was standing at the foot of my bed watching me. So I laid down on the couch downstairs. As soon as I closed my eyes, I heard music coming from upstairs. Sad, creepy music. I got up, turned on the lights and proceeded to go around to every room and check them. I checked the TVs, radios, anything that may make noise. I went outside and checked around the house. Nothing. I shut off the lights, and as soon as I closed my eyes I heard the music start again, and then right next to my ear, I heard someone say my name. I jumped up, flicked on the lights, grabbed my shoes and ran to my friend's house down the street. Her father wasn't too happy with me banging on the door at 12:30 a.m., but I was not going back there alone. As I got older I learned to ignore feelings and sounds. Eventually I chalked it up to a child's imagination until my son started having the same experiences. When we'd visit he'd stay in my old bedroom and he'd ask me the next day, "Why did you keep walking down the hall and then just come in my room and stare at me?" Or "Why did you keep calling my name and waking me up?" After that I did something really stupid. I was at their house and couldn't sleep, so I was watching movies. The room I was staying in was also my grandmother's office. She wrote short stories and had over 200 published, so there was a computer, paper, pens and a voice recorder. I had just watched White Noise and it was around 3 a.m. I looked over and saw the voice recorder and thought, I grabbed it and went out on the back porch. I sat there for a minute and thought, if any neighbors get up and see me, they are going to think I'm crazy. So I went and sat in my car. I started recording and saying things like, "Is there anyone there? Does anyone want to say anything? If anyone is there, speak." I rewound it. You can hear me kinda laughing, and after I say speak there is about 30 seconds of dead air. Then the creepiest voice in an evil tone says speak. I noped the fuck out of the car, ran inside, turned on all the lights, and woke my grandmother up. I played it for her, and she said, "Why would you do that? I've told you never to mess with things like that." I didn't sleep for weeks. I still have the recording, and it still gives me chills. I've actually had a lot of weird, scary things happen to me throughout my life. I don't know if it's ghosts, different dimensions, aliens. Who knows? I don't mess around with things anymore. I'm good not knowing. About 3 years ago, I woke up at about 2:30, maybe 3 a.m. I wanted water, so I got up to the kitchen and I stopped. I saw something in the kitchen window. Took maybe 3 steps forward and saw a silhouette. I couldn't make out any good features as he was completely black, but I could definitely tell he was hairy, about 7 feet tall, huge muscles, and breathing fast and heavily like he had been running. I could tell it was staring at me just from the feeling of fear. I didn't scream, but I ran back into my room. Sat there in fear for a good 5 minutes, then I heard walking on the other side of my window. The kitchen window faces the backyard and my window faces the front yard, which we do have a fence around. My breath was silent, never bothered to move an inch. Heard nothing after that and somehow I fell asleep. Woke up the next morning and told my dad about it. He called me a liar, saying if it was true, then I would have screamed like a coward. Now when I tell it, he gets mad I didn't scream because then he could have shot the intruder with a gun. People say I was sleeping, but it was too real and I remember everything. I never did check the backyard or front yard for any clues. Too traumatized. I still wonder if it was a monster, paranormal activity, or an intruder. Please hear me out, this is out there and I'm not entirely convinced it happened myself, but the evidence seems to say otherwise. I've actually started therapy last year to help with what has happened to me over the years. Now there is a lot to unpack, so if you have any questions I'll be happy to answer, but please don't just come out and call me a liar or fucking crazy or anything derogatory because it does not help in finding out what really happened to me. The first thing I remember happening to me was when I was a young child. I would see shadow figures with different colored eye peeking at me from the top of my closet. I would always be in bed and cover myself up as soon as I knew they were there. They weren't down low, where say a child's eyes would be, and they would always only peep out from behind the baseboards on the sides of the closet doors. The eyes would be up high, higher than any human being. So look at a doorway in your house and look at the top corner of it. That's where they would peep out from and look at me. Always same spot, only thing that changed was their eye color. Nothing too creepy, but for a 5 or 6-year-old it was terrifying enough. I would also wake up to these lights in my room. Very much like searchlights, but in a very small form. Shining through the windows. That only happened once or twice, though, but it still scared me a bit. A few years pass, and I move into my parents' basement as I basically live down there anyway. Had my own space, an own bedroom and nice big basement to myself most of the time. A couple nights, though, I woke up outside my house. Always in my boxers, and on one occasion it was the middle of winter during a winter storm. I was freezing. This is where it starts to get kinda weird, and I apologize in advance. I woke up one morning to my friend waking me up because I was late to hang out with him that day. I slept through my alarm and didn't answer phone, so he just came over. He came in my room and woke me up and instantly said, "Dude, what the fuck are you bleeding?" I got up and kinda looked around at what he was talking about. I had white pillowcases, and when I picked it up there was a bloody handprint clear as day on it. But when I put my hand up to the handprint, it definitely was not mine. The fingers were way too thin and a lot longer. But no other blood, no drops, no dried blood on me. Anywhere. We decided to go out and hang out and try and figure it out, and the best thing we thought of was that I had a bloody nose during the night and wiped it in the pillow, but the hands didn't match up, so we kinda were dumbfounded. Same year I kept having these very realistic dreams. I would dream of myself in a hallway sitting on a cold metal bench. Naked. The walls were clouds? Best way I could describe it. You could touch them and poke through them, but there was something there that made a wall. During this dream a door would slowly open and I would see a shadow of 3 beings. And I would always wake up drenched in sweat. About a year later I was at a pool party for one of my best friend's birthday. We were all hanging out by the pool and laying in tanning chairs and stuff, listening to music and having fun. When I got out of pool and sat in chair to relax, I noticed a weird bump in my left arm. It didn't hurt, it didn't have any redness or bruising or anything, but there was definitely something there. So I started to squeeze it. It took quite a bit of squeezing and a lot of pressure, but all of a sudden this thing just blooped out. It was weird. It didn't pop like a zit and actually pop and blood and whatnot. It just kinda slowly blooped out of my skin with no blood on it or coming from where it came out of. The hole basically sealed behind it coming out. It didn't make sense. So I grabbed the thing and it was globe-shaped. It was black and gray. But gray being lines that moved through this thing almost in a pattern. Best I can describe it is it looked like a black and gray basketball. But tiny. About the size of a large pea. I was stumped. Too scared to show my friends and too scared to tell my parents about it. Back then we didn't have Google or cell phones, and I really didn't even know where to begin on how to investigate what has been happening to me. After that very strange year things settled down for quite a while. Some strange things here and there, but nothing too out of the ordinary. Until this last summer. Last summer I started seeing the shadow figures again, but this time they weren't in my room when I was going to sleep, but around in my backyard when I took the dogs out, or even across the street while I sit on the porch and smoke cigarettes. It happened for a week or two, but nothing too scary or anything I could handle until September 1st of this year at about 3 to 4 a.m. I had an experience I will never forget. Night started out fine. Playing games with my son, and my wife was on nights, so she was at work. My son slept in mine and my wife's bed with me that night. Along with the 2 dogs at the sides of the bed. So went to sleep and woke up and turned over to look at the clock, and when I turned my body over I was frozen with fear. I saw the time was 3:18, but as I was looking at that I could see a static, muscular being's legs and part of its arm in my view of the alarm clock and bed. This very distinct repetitive thud was happening too. Thud, tritter thud, thud, tritter thud, thud. For some reason the next thing I knew I was on my back and I could see this being now. I went to go grab my son and get the fuck out of there, but I realized I couldn't move. I could feel the tears in my eyes falling down the sides of my face, and I tried screaming with all my might, but nothing came out. That's when I heard a voice very robotic, say, "We are not going to hurt you or your son, everything will be fine." As weird and scary as it was actually kinda soothing. It felt like an old friend talking to me, but when I looked down to see what this creature was doing made me even more scared. This creature stood at least 7 or 8 feet tall, and at the time the only thing I could describe him as was a huge ant being. But with lobster-like hands. Very muscular, and his color was a dark orange or light brown. He also had this wave of white energy surrounding him everywhere. Continued, he was doing something with my left arm. Waving it up and down with his hands. Very gently but moving his hands up and down my arm, while also waving it up and down, if that makes any sense lol. It lasted about 5 or 6 minutes, but felt like a lifetime. I woke up, and everything was back to normal, checked my son so fucking fast, and he was fast asleep. Checked the dogs and they were on the ground sleeping too. The weird thing about this night too is that I'm a night hawk. I was having fun that night playing video games and my son and dogs were being super cute together, so I started taking a million pictures of them. Those pics have timestamps. I start at 12:11 a.m. and took at least 7 or 8 pictures of them for the next 2 or 3 hours. Then my camera goes blank for about an hour, no pics starting around 3:05 a.m. Then I started taking pics again at 4:30 a.m. But then I looked at my arm. My arm was a mess. There was this massive bump under my skin with 2 small puncture marks beside the lump. It felt like a bad bruise. But something definitely in there. I didn't freak out as by this time I was actually talking to my therapist about my past experiences and I was actually going to see her on the Monday coming up. We are still trying to figure out what the fuck is actually happening, but with the power of the internet and Google we have a pretty good idea. That being in my room we found out was not actually an ant, but a mantis being. Their heads look very similar. Just a tiny piece in this puzzle we have solved for now, but in reality I don't think we're ever going to solve this one. Nothing has happened to me since that night. I actually tried digging out whatever was put or taken out of my arm with no success. I know I'm gonna get a lot of flack and yeah your fucking bullshit comments from this story, but that's totally up to you to decide for yourself. If anything has ever happened to you that is similar to my story I'd love to hear from you. A while back, when I was about 13, I was pretty sure there was a ghost living in the back of my house. It started with odd dreams. In these dreams, I would be confronting the same large shadowy figure, and the confrontations would get more intense with each passing night. However, dreams are easy to brush off, and I just moved on with life. Then the unexplained noises began, knocks on the walls and scratching, but that could just be the house settling or mice. Eventually the mice possibility was ruled out. That's alright, just means the house is settling. One day, I have to go into one of the rooms, and the entire time I'm in this room I feel like I'm being watched, but hey, maybe I'm just being paranoid. As I leave the room, I feel something grab my hand. I scream and run to tell my dad. He says you'll smudge, we're Native American. A week goes by and my little brother starts to say he's been seeing a strange shadowy figure in the back, and now I'm pretty sure there's something there. My dad still has not smudged. That same night, I FaceTime some friends and we do a late night study session. I go downstairs to get some coffee since I'm feeling tired, and while I'm down there, the noises start up again. I mute myself and call since I really don't want to explain the noises and get told I'm crazy, and since I'm already almost done with making the coffee I decide to stick it out. As I'm leaving the kitchen, one of the dining room chairs, kitchen and dining room are connected, pulls out from the table and blocks my way. I ran up the stairs and into my room. My friend asks me why I looked so scared, I explained and they all look confused and ask me why I didn't think it was the other person messing with me. I ask what they mean and they all say they saw someone walk by. I told my dad the next morning, and while we're talking my mom walks in. I finally inform her of the situation, to which she says she was having some odd dreams with a shadowy figure as well. As we're having this conversation, we hear the front door unlock and then open. My dad smudged that day, and nothing like that has ever happened in this house again. Also, sorry for the formatting, I'm on mobile. I was exploring an abandoned house with a few of my friends in the middle of the night. This place is known to have a homeless person sometimes living in it, even though it's miles from the city. I've been in multiple times during the day and night, but this one shook me to my core. When we entered the house, I went in first, of course due to my friends being chickens. The house was completely still, no sounds of life, not even a bug flew around or near me. We went upstairs to the children's bedroom. Right next to it is the attic that I always dread to approach. The time before I came back to this house, I walked up the attic to see a baby doll hanging from a noose. Still swaying where there was no draft of air. However, on this night I didn't even make it out of the kids' room. I had at least 4 or 5 friends with me this night. They were all following my steps. If I ran, they ran. For good reason too. I was talking to 2 other friends in the bedroom, to only hear a blood-curdling scream from the attic. It wasn't just a random scream, but a little girl's scream. I jumped and was thinking about running out until I realized that all of my friends already started running. I thought they heard it too by their reactions, but simply my reaction scared them. They heard nothing. I thought I was crazy, but I am not one to just hear things like that. The weirdest part is that there was no creaking from the attic above us. If a person were up there even sitting, just a shift of movement and you'd hear a creak. To this day, they swear up and down that they heard nothing, but every day that little girl's scream still courses through my head. A female friend of mine was murdered by her ex while I was in prison. I had no idea at the time. When I got out, I went looking for my friend because I owed her some apologies for some grimy things, but her numbers didn't work and I couldn't find her. I went on Google and discovered that some men had found out she kept money at home and decided to rob her. They had also decided that, if she was home, they would have to kill her to prevent her from testifying. She was home. They stabbed and suffocated her, and she died in terror and fear. That's not the creepy part. Fast forward a couple of years and I, having not learned much, am headed back to prison. As I'm waiting in the transfer cell with another 6 or 7 guys for our van to transport us to Denver, an all-day ordeal. None of us know one another, and we do the usual jail thing of summing up our current charges. I did mine, stupidly minor, drug dealing, and then the next guy takes his turn and says I killed a girl while I was robbing her. I spent the afternoon in the cell and later, next to him chained up in the transfer van, listening to him tell the story in great detail. I wish I had had the courage to kill him. I would feel worse about that if he hadn't been 20 years younger, 50 pounds heavier, and multiple murder convictions more formidable than I was. I would have gotten my ass kicked and extra prison time, at best. But I still wish I had tried. Instead, I just listened and took as many showers as I could for a while, but it was a long time before I felt clean. First, I do not believe in supernatural things. Ghosts, etc. But something happened when I was a kid that I cannot explain and gave me the creeps for a long time. I had a habit of twirling my hair around my finger all the time. Even at night I would sometimes do this in my sleep and wake up with my hand all tied into my hair. One night I felt like I was being petted on my head. It woke me up, and in my drowsy state I assumed I was again tied up in my hair, but I realized both hands were down at my sides. I fell back asleep soon after, but I did think that was weird. The next morning at breakfast my oldest brother kept looking at me like he was afraid. He hardly ate and just kept looking over like he tried, but failed to not look. He was even pale. I asked him finally, kind of angrily, why he kept looking at me. He burst out crying and said he was scared because he saw a shadow man standing over me during the night. That's the first time I remember feeling that ice down your spine feeling. He told me later, when we had all kind of gotten past that uncomfortable breakfast, that it was just a man-shaped shadow, but with a top hat. It took some time before I could sleep comfortably again. My brother insisted on what he saw that night into adulthood. 40 years later, and I don't really believe it, but I can't explain it either, and the memory is very clear. Maybe it's just me being paranoid, but during the pandemic there was a string of kidnappings in my area, and everyone was told to be on high alert, don't walk with headphones in, etc. I would walk home from work up a pretty busy street every night, but since everything was shut down it had become a little more quiet. I was walking up the hill on my way home after dark this one night, and the road was totally quiet. Then this car immediately pulled up to the curb and stopped directly in front of me. Since we were in the midst of the pandemic, and I assumed it was an Uber dropping someone off, happens a lot, I stopped walking and waited so that I could keep distance from the person getting out of the car. They were pretty close. On one side of me was the road, and on the other side just a line of houses. I waited for a bit and started getting this feeling. So I decided to test out my paranoia and looked down the street, saw no cars coming, and started to cross instead of continuing past the car that was just sitting there. As soon as I turned and made to step off the curb, the car in front peeled off right quick, so fast the tires did a little screech. I didn't even make it of the curb, I ended up just getting back up on the sidewalk and hurrying home. It happened again sometime later, only this time I did cross the street, then crossed back, and the same car pulled in front of me again, so I crossed the street again, and a bunch of dudes got out of the car and started arguing each other. TBF, even if I am just overly observant or paranoid, I'd rather be that than kidnapped, so. I've written about this before, however, when I was a fairly new police officer, I and another officer get sent to an ascertain the problem investigation. Basically, a neighbor called and said there was loud screaming, banging, and yelling coming from apartment number 3. We get there and walk down a long alley to the apartments. As we approach the apartment in question, a lady comes walking out. I was in total, complete shock for about 5 seconds and seriously thought I was seeing something in a B-slasher movie. In her left hand, she was holding a decapitated female's head, which was dripping blood from it. I later learned the girl was 9 years old. In her right hand, she was holding a butcher's knife, also covered in blood. It took me several seconds to comprehend. Once I woke up and yelled at her, she dropped the head, and it bounced around, almost like a soccer ball. We get her hooked up and go to clear the apartment. The apartment looked like something out of a horror movie. Blood was everywhere, and as I walked into the back bedroom, I slipped and fell into it. Totally covered me in my uniform. I ended up throwing it away. In the back bedroom was a 7-year-old male, also decapitated. I was actually physically ill after seeing this crime scene, although not the worst I have seen. It has been over 30 years since this occurred, and I still have flashbacks, nightmares. The lady? The kid's grandmother is currently on death row in California, although the death penalty there has been retracted. So, to start, I don't know if this is real or not. I personally believe it is, since I can recall really specific things about it that I just don't see it being any other way. This is how my memory goes. I'm only around 9 or 10, but I'm standing in the middle of the athletics track, which is why I know that it mustn't have been during the day the school would punish you for going into that area. You were only allowed there when it was sports day, otherwise it was out of bounds, which is attached to a football oval and soccer field in my primary school. It's really dark outside, no stars, just pure black. The lights for the track are on, even though there's nobody on it. The school buildings over to the left have the outdoor lights on. The smell of fresh rain is everywhere, and it is cold. Like, very, very cold. Now, the school isn't that far away from my old house. It's about 1 kilometer or a 3-minute walk away. It's definitely nighttime because I walk past the community center and mechanics shop. Both are closed, no lights on. Cross over the main road, all lit up with yellow lights. Walk right in front of the old video rental store, they have the lights off. Except for the drinks fridge thing with these blue lights, followed by the pizza shop lights on in the very back, but closed. They usually closed at 10 p.m., so it had to be later than that. And then left down the road to my house, where the door is unlocked. Then that's where my memory ends. I don't have a ton of memories from my childhood, snippets of things, faces, usually stuff that really isn't important. But that entire night, from waking, I guess, to walking back home, I can still vividly remember all the details. No cars coming down any of the roads, hopping the gate that goes into the football field, the smell of fresh rain everywhere, the way the light reflected on the brick platform, I'm not sure what to call it. It's like a spot to stop while crossing the main road, as it was a very wide road as I crossed the main street. Just, everything screams that it is a memory. Edit, TLDR, I have an unexplained memory of waking up in a field at 10 years old and walking back through the town in the middle of the night, back to my house that was unlocked and unable to remember anything after that. This happened recently and really creeped me out. I live somewhere where hitchhiking is very common. I don't have a car, so I hitchhike all the time. Usually interactions go like this: driver pulls up and says the name of the place he or she is driving to. Like, Jerusalem. Potential hitchhiker either gets into the car or says no thanks, and the car drives away. The end. This time, a guy pulled up, looked at me, and said, "Hey. How are you?" He sounded super excited and friendly, and from his tone I assumed he recognized me. So I responded, "Hey. How are you?" While walking closer to his car to look in the window, it was night. I immediately realized that I didn't actually know him. Weird, but maybe he's just unusually friendly. Then he said, "Where are you heading?" This is a big no-no. Hitchhiking etiquette is for the driver to state the destination. So I responded, "Where are you going?" while still smiling. He said, "Nagohit, the area around there. That's right near where I live and is a very good hitchhike. It is also really far away, so he could have dropped off people at any destination along the way. Basically any hitchhiker would have seen that as a good destination. But by that point I decided there were too many red flags, so I said, "No thanks." Instead of driving off, he then said, "Come on, where do you need? Anything along the way, Summit Haggish? I'll take you." Red flag number 3, he should not have been that insistent. I again politely but firmly said, "No thanks." There were some other hitchhikers standing around, but I didn't pass on his offer to them because I thought he was creepy. Finally he drove off, looking disappointed. In retrospect, there are non-creepy reasons why he might have been desperate to take along a hitchhiker. Maybe he was tired and wanted someone to keep him awake, or maybe he was nervous about driving alone at night. The roads are badly lit and kind of dangerous in that area. But yeah, no regrets on my part for not getting in. Definitely the sketchiest interaction I've ever had while hitchhiking. Nothing good for me, just run-of-the-mill creepy stuff. Saw a UFO one time with a buddy that was a silently floating black rectangular prism 100 yards above the treeline, the exact shape and size of a box truck's box part with taillights to match, but silently and slowly flying, unlike a box truck. Went to a president's house once as kid with my dad, Mount Vernon so whoever lives there. I was maybe 7 to 8. Anyway, we are the caboose of the tour so we can take our time. The tour guide breezes past a room basically saying this was his office, but the door was open with a chain blocking it and a sign, "Please do not bend chain." Well, the type of kid I was, that meant I had to bend it, so I did and leaned in to look around. I saw a black man, dressed well, suit, vest but no jacket, but dressed for the period like one of the actors they employ. Fuck, I think I'm caught, trouble time now. As I jump back startled to have seen the employee, my dad sees this being behind me and leans in to see what had me startled enough to jump. He sees in the room, nothing. Just the office furnishings. He then asked, curious at the lack of obvious startlements, "Shhwm, I know I invented that word," and I told him the man caught me. He informed me that there was no such man, but I fucking saw him clear as day, looking like any other full-blooded ass human, albeit in costume. Not even translucent like an apparition is usually portrayed. If I were close enough I would have seen the sweat on his goddamn brow, he was so real looking. We both believe I saw a ghost that day. Last one is just a run-of-the-mill crazy guy like some others in here, with a minor difference that makes it less scary. I was walking to the dumpster at my old apartments and saw a guy I used to see walking around everywhere. I haven't seen him in a while and I assume that he is in prison lol, because when I was walking near him, I gave him the good ol' head nod and a "how's it going?" and his response was to tell me, "Fuck you Americans, come to Africa, we will kill you. I'll kill you right now," yada yada, aggressive threats and such. I switched my trash to my left hand, put my right near my waist, and calmly said I wouldn't try it, man. He moved on, ranting and raving about killing me, all Americans, something about raping Americans. It was honestly hard to keep up with. I walked to the trash and threw mine away and went into my apartment to tell the tale of luckily not having to shoot this crazy bastard. Lord knows I didn't want to, but I also don't want to be raped and killed either, so if I had to make the choice it would have been an easy one. And that is the first story of crazy bastards that decided not to get shot. The next two each pulled a knife and left when I put my hand on the grip and even left it in the holster because I guess they remembered they left their oven on at home or something. Those stories are less fun though. Crazy African guy was a whole nother level of random. The other two were just a stick-up kid and some fat Trump supporter, his shirt said so, who got threatened because I look like one of the anti-furs. It's just a batlivist guy, I'm a punk. We have been around since '77, get with the times.